This is Elias Dufexes. You're watching That Tom Clancy Show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another brand new episode of That Tom Clancy Show. This is officially the first episode that is being filmed specifically for you, Tube. So, thank you all for joining us in this wonderful experiment. Today, I'm going to be sitting down with the developer of a lovely game called Doom and Destiny Worlds. First, though, let's roll that trailer. So, Bits and Pixels, please join me in welcoming today's guest, Francesco.
Amazing. Hello, everyone.
That was an excellent face, since our audience just applauded you, too. They were so kind today. So, Francesco, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Well, the first question I ask everybody, especially game developers, is a very simple one. And it's, what are you playing right now?
Right now, I just bought Blasphemous on the PS4, and I'm really enjoying it. And also, with a bunch of friends, we are very into Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the Warzone.
I'm surprised you have the hard drive space for it.
Actually, it's on PlayStation, so I'm
I'm double
a console
surprised.
boy.
I mean, hey, as long as you're playing games, I don't personally care what you're playing them on. So,
yeah, I agree too. But I started to love consoles because in the past years, every time I try something new on PC, I had to update the graphic cards, the settings. So there's always something that wasn't working on my computer. So one day I decided, no, let's buy a console, let's buy a PlayStation.
Yeah, there is something to say for the simplicity of console, because it's just you drop $400 or $500 or however that translates into euros, and you have a box that is going to work for 5, 6, 7 years. That you don't have to worry about swapping out RAM, hopefully, processors, none of that. You just have a box that works. The long-term battery health of the controllers is terrible, but
especially during lockdown. Lucky for me, I had the two controllers, and when one was running out of battery, I just charged it and picked another one. It was like changing a clip in a gun.
Yeah, We have 3 here in our house. Th- 3. Yeah, for some reason, I'm having problems with my right hand, which is unfortunate because I'm right-handed. But yeah, we keep 3 in the house. But that said, though, the PlayStation here for us really, because I'm primarily a PC player these days, is really just our streaming box. So it's like where our Hulu, our Netflix, HBO, all that stuff is going through. But strangely enough, that's precisely what our PlayStation 3 was too. Hmm. That said, though, my Xbox isn't even plugged into anything, so it's not like it's winning any competitions either. Um, but yeah, I mean, the console is definitely an easier market to get into for sure. Um, Not to discredit anything about console gamers or anything like that. The PC is very much more like for people who want to control every single teeny detail of their experience.
Yes.
Like me.
A couple of years ago, there was an argument that on PC games were cheaper thanks to Steam and all the sales, season sales, and stuff like that. But I think lately, even on consoles, if you wait a little, you can find you can download the game from the store, and it's I think that the price is the same. So right
Yeah.
now there is no argument for me console forever. There is also a charm factor because when I came home and I sit on my sofa, I grab the controller. I don't know. I feel like when I was a kid and I was playing the Super Nintendo in front of the TV,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I feel young again.
I can understand that for sure. My way around that is that I keep my Nintendo Switch plugged into my monitor. So my Switch is sitting on my desk, back in the off stage area behind me, and it's I can feel like a kid wherever. That and I don't feel like I ever grew up. Yes. Well, we could sit here and we could talk about consoles and childhood memories and all this stuff forever, and we probably will later in the conversation. But we're here today to talk about Doom and Destiny Worlds, the indie game that you have presently on Steam. So, hey, PC players, you can go purchase it right now if you feel so inclined after seeing that trailer. But for people who have more questions, how would you explain Doom and Destiny to my audience?
Wow, it's always very hard for me to describe in a few words my games. Doom and Destiny Worlds is a mix of open world survival game and classic turn-based RPGs. The twist is that the story is about 4 ordinary nerds who ended up in a fantasy world without knowing it, and they have to figure it out a way to return to their world. And so it's a very comic adventure, light-hearted, but the game is full of mechanics. It's very deep. There is a lot of content, and it's not a joke.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. It's a real game. That's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to tell my mom. It's a real game.
I tried to tell my mom about this, and I just gave up.
Me too. And I have been doing it for 10 years.
Oh, nice.
And then I give up.
Well, kudos for continuing the good fight. And of course, good luck in continuing the good fight. And I will say that the kind of comic element definitely came through in the trailer. It reminded me to an extent of I don't know if you're familiar, but with Golf Story, the comedy golf RPG that came out in the Switch.
Oh, yeah. I haven't played it, but
It's
I knew
so
about
good.
its existence.
It is just such a silly game. and I
I,
love
I
it.
have to try it.
Yeah, I especially now because it's, I think, like at least 3 years old. So you've got to be able to find it at a decent deal. And I don't think it was horribly expensive when it came out. Um, but yeah, I highly recommend, and I highly recommend it to you all out there too. Um, but yeah, it's just when I was going through all of the media and stuff that you have on your press kit and watching the trailer and over on the Steam page and stuff, it definitely, like, it felt to me from what I could see like this combination of, well, golf story clearly, also some Final Fantasy, and a touch of Stardew Valley.
Yes, yes. It's when we started developing the game 10 years ago. We had this idea to mix genres together, and because we came from two very story-driven role-playing games, and at the time there was this rising of let's say farming simulators, but it's not the right terms. But game like Stardew Valley,
Yeah.
and I, with my colleague, we decided let's try something. Let's drop some ideas. Let's see if we can combine these elements. And 4 years later, we have a game.
Nice. Yeah. I want to say like Life Sim would probably be like a better name, you know.
Yes, I think it would be better. Yes, I agree.
All I know is they're not for me. Uh, Regular life is engaging enough that I don't need to pretend to be a farmer or something else in my free time.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with you. As a matter
Unless
of
there's
fact,
a twist to it.
What? Excuse me?
Unless there's like a twist to it, like having to survive with friends in a fantasy island.
Oh yes, of course. But the survival element right now in Doom and Destiny worlds is very little. We postpone it for a future DLC that we are working on it, and the farming and there is no life simulator. There are some farming features, but mostly if you want, you are not forced to do it. It's like an option. Much like, I don't know, for example, the alchemy system in The Witcher. You are not
Yeah.
forced to become an alchemist, but if you want, you can do it,
Yeah,
and it can help you in your quest. And
yeah, or like chocobo farming in Final Fantasy VII,
yes,
or
exactly.
breeding or whatever. You know what I mean. And hopefully you do too. That was, I remember going through all of that just because I wanted the Knights of the Round materia, and like I can't get those hours back.
Yeah, me too. I remember back in the days, there was no internet. At least for me, it wasn't available. You couldn't find how to complete the game. And I remember finding a small book, a small guide in a magazine. Man, I was the coolest kid in the block because I had all the infos and the secrets about Doom and about Final Fantasy, and I knew how to unlock the Knights of the Round, and
Yeah.
good
Well,
times.
it's like you sit back and you look at games like that, and to an extent you have to like appreciate that they put a bunch of time and effort into that system, and they left that very tantalizing island that you couldn't get to. But how in the world was somebody supposed to figure out that if you spent literal hours of your life getting chocobos to make baby chocobos, that you were going to be able to get a special chocobo, of which there was no indication in the game of them actually existing, that would be able to get you to that one place to get a completely optional spell. Like,
I have no idea. I also remember that when I was a kid, all the games were in English, but I didn't understand English. So for me, it was all about a trial and error. So I have absolutely no idea how I managed to complete that game and even find the Knights of the Round. because I was just clicking everything and walking around the world map, trying to find the right spot to do something.
And now here we are 25 years later, and Italian is just one of the basic languages that most games are localized into. Because for people out there who aren't in the know, there are the primary languages for Western games, the EFIGS languages, English, French, Italian, German, Spanish. And so those are, the languages that everybody localizes for. And some studios also then will localize into like Portuguese to give an additional option, especially American developers, because there's the South American market and Portuguese is very big down there. One of the first big responsibilities I had as a tester back in the day was I did a lot of our localization testing, because I was the only person that could tell the difference between Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese just by listening to them. And I thought that was just, a skill everybody had. But nope. They all sound different, but...
Yeah. Once it's not easy, because unless you are familiar and you had the time to listen to them, for a first-time listener, it's not that easy. But I understand what you mean.
Well, I wasn't a first-time listener. For a period of time in my life, I used to be fluent in French, and when one of the Romance languages, you can you can understand enough.
Yes. And it's funny for me because right now, since Doom and Destiny World, for example, is translated in 7 languages, and sometimes we don't have the time to contact the localization, but for simple words, I use Google Translator.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny to see that some words, even in Russian, despite the different alphabet, something is similar. It's similar to French, to German. For example, German is very similar to English in some extent.
Well, it's because English is a Germanic language.
Yes. And and then you realize that some words, even in Russian, the alphabet is different, but somehow they are similar to some words in Spanish or French. It's quite fascinating, it's charming, it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think about it, over the last several hundred years, the Italian states, Spain, Portugal, France, all of the countries that used to exist that now make up Germany and Eastern Europe and England and the Scandinavian countries, I mean, they were all going back and forth with each other with trade and culture and conquering, and those influences are bound to be there. And it was even something my guest last night that I had on the show, we were commenting that, Russian spoken even has this almost kind of like French melody to it, and it's so interesting to see how it all connects, with each other. And then especially too, I mean, it's English has a lot of similarities with French as well, because in the early or the mid 11th century, a bunch of Frenchmen decided, let's go invade England. And they did. And they kicked their ass too. So it is pretty interesting that way. Although a personal, kind of fun achievement in 2011, I was in Germany right after Christmas, and I noticed that if I could sit and read something like a menu, and I had enough time to do it, I could logic out what the food was, because there is still enough similarity between our language and German that if you understand, how words are kind of put together and roots and things like that, you can look at it and be like, oh, this is a chicken dish. This is a beef dish, you know? And then like, ooh, this one has cabbage. I won't get that one, but it's kind of fun. Man,
I agree.
we're the nerds that would be stuck on that island. Oh man. Yeah, it's every episode I end up like going off on like some like just out in the weeds on like some nerd thing, and I'm happy today was language. So
Me too.
it's because it's you know it's a very important tool that I'm glad that we invented, kind of, and made so many cool versions of. So, yeah.
I remember when I started developing games, I'm not very fluent in English, mostly because I learned it by watching YouTube videos. I started learning English watching the Angry Video Game Nerd
Oh God,
back
I'm
in the
so
days.
sorry.
And I remember when we first published our first game, that was it was Doom and Destiny, the first one,
Mm-hmm.
and I brought all the dialogues, and my written English was awful. It was terrible, especially because in the first month of development we moved into this studio, but we didn't have the internet connection, and I had to use my dictionary page, physical
Yeah.
dictionary, not anything. And it was crazy. And the game features so many misspellings. It was amazing. But people enjoyed it because they thought it was like a joke and a reference to all those old Japanese role-playing games that had awful translation.
Yes,
And they
did.
said, "Oh, these guys are amazing. They did the same awful translation for games, role-playing games from the '90s. Amazing." As a matter of fact, it was just my ignorance.
No, it was just remember, in hindsight, you always did it intentionally.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
It was a
yeah.
feature.
He's telling a joke. He did it on purpose. He's just trying to be, self-deprecating humor. No, it's, one. I will say that learning from like YouTube or American television is strangely enough actually a very decent way to learn the language because you're seeing how like regular people talk as opposed to like textbook people,
Yes.
because I remember like when I was learning French in high school, and you look at these books and you're reading these sentences, and I am like, look, Francois is never just going to go to the library. It's there's always going to be something else to it. Then like later in high school, they switched us over to, they actually made this pretty decent, like, I think it was called French in Action. And it was like this totally made in like the late 80s, early 90s, like video series. And like, it just gave such a better idea of what conversational French actually looked like. And it was no longer just like "Où est la salle de bain?" It was like giving you actual, like this is how French people talk, and yeah, that helped a lot.
I started with YouTube, but then I moved to movies. I've always been a nerd for horror movies from the '80s, and I started to understand the action, what was going on, and I was very proud. Then one day I decided to move to 007 Casino Royale,
Yeah,
with Daniel Craig, and I remember not understanding a single word.
that's because
I had
they're
no idea. It was I don't know
well, they're
what was happening.
English.
Yeah, it was something completely different, and they were talking very fast. I remember the first scene that the guy entered the room, says something to another guy, then the other guy dies. What's going on? We're shooting, but I had no understanding what was happening.
I'm sure that the next comment I'm about to make is going to ruffle some feathers over in the UK, but there is a point at which they start getting into like their common colloquial like kind of stuff, and I just start doubting they're speaking English. And I say this as a person who has spent a lot of time with people from the UK and in the UK, and there were points where I'm just like, I have no idea what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree with you. One
Um,
of my favorite show is IT Crowd. It's a British
mhm.
comedy about IT guys.
I've watched
And there
like
was
2
this,
episodes.
I think it's one of the best comedy ever made. And there is this one episode when they pretend to be football fans,
Hmm.
and they had this fake accent when they talk, and it's like what you say. You don't understand what they're saying because it's very hard to. It's not even English.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here in the U.S., we have several accents like that too. I mean, because hell, we're basically a continent. Uh, ooh, excuse me there. And you get like some of the deep South, like down in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, that kind of area, that gets kind of difficult to understand. And then you get like Appalachia and like the people in like the Blue Ridge Mountains or like the heart of West Virginia, and like that can be really tough to understand. But like if you can pick up on a few key accents in English, regardless of if it's like Australia, UK, Canada, or the US, you can understand them all. And like like the key accents from my personal experience to be able to understand are West Virginia hillbilly, which is a tough one to get. Drunk Scotsman, uh, and any Australian. And if you can understand those 3 accents in English, you can understand everybody in
it's
English.
a it's a good benchmark.
Well, I mean, it's because like drunk Scotsman. It's just because, and like I'm
Well,
not making fun of the Scottish people here at all, because they are some of the nicest and warmest people that I've ever met. But they have this very kind of fluid accent as compared to like the what we consider like the English accent. And when you get somebody who's a little inebriated, who's also kind of slurring some words, it makes it all sound like this sea of drunken mush. And when you can understand that, you're golden.
in Italy, I think it's even worse because you can drive 50 kilometers from one town to another,
Mm-hmm.
and each place has its own dialect. And if you, for me, for example, if I listen to someone from the south of Italy speaking in dialect, I can't understand a word, nothing. And it's it's almost amazing how different the dialect and the food. You
Yeah.
just have to travel, I don't know, half an hour by car, and you ended up in a town where you can understand each other dialect.
Yeah, I can understand that. Uh, well, we've kind of gone very far afield on this one, just because we were talking about localization. Um, but we kind of touched on earlier that you have a bunch of different systems in the game with turn-based combat. You're adding survival later on. You have the optional farming stuff. And so I guess really the big question I have, because we've accidentally covered everything else that I wrote down for my notes for the interview, uh, is it must have been a pain in the ass to put all of that into one game.
Yes, it was. And the fun fact is that when we started our second games, Doom and Destiny Advanced, which is a classic story-driven RPG, at the first of development, we were afraid that we weren't adding nothing much more in comparison with the previous title. And we kept adding stuff until the game was so big and so huge that was very hard to handle. So when we started this one, Doom and Destiny Wars, we said, okay, let's keep it simple. And then I remember taking about 10 working days to make a bush, because you can cut the bush, burn it, plant it, it can grow, you can cut it and it can grow again, you can make fruits, you can plant seeds. And I still remember the words, and we always make fun of it, just saying, let's keep it simple, and then spend 1 month over a tree to make it work. Because it wasn't easy. The hard part, and it's something that we are still working on it, thanks to the feedback of the players, and it's to balance every element and to make it fun.
Yeah.
And also give an impression that it's something you can do because it's useful. For example, that you mentioned farming and growing your own food. It's optional, you don't have to do it. But if you do, you have an extra supply of fruits, and you can use them to make potions and also to make some ingredients that you can use to make a magical ink that can be used to write magic scrolls. So you are not growing food only to heal yourself, but also to make consumable that you can use in battle against your enemies. And it's always trying to find the right balance amongst all these elements that is very, very hard to make. Because when you play the game, you just see a bush and you see your character walking in front of it, and you press A and the bush is cut. And you say, okay, cool, that was easy. But it's not always easy to understand how much work went into it, and how many hours we spent to make it looks easy to understand and to use.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part about making games.
Well,
especially role-playing games. Well, every game is hard to make. So I'm not taking any credit for making role-playing games.
Well, especially in that bush instance that you're talking about, you have so the player walks up to the bush, and so the bush is then checking, or the player is checking, I don't know precisely how you have it set up, if the player is in range of being able to interact with the bush. Then it has to then run the check for what tool does the player have equipped, because then that's going to affect what options the player has for interacting with the bush. Because, like, as you mentioned, you could set it on fire. Well, then does the player have the torch in their hand, or do they have an axe? You know, and so there's so many different possible interactions between, you know, one item and another item, or, you know, one actor and another actor, that it's just and then you kind of have to then start thinking of like completely outside the box solutions, you know, because yeah, I mean, what the player's not always going to approach a situation the way you design it too.
Yes, so the secret is to manage to give the player the feeling, the impression that he has the total freedom to do anything he wants. But somehow he can only do a bunch of options. It's not easy to balance. But also this, for us, for example, for this game, this method to make, we talked about the bush and its interactivity, it was a double-edged sword, because when we create the bush, we said, okay, let's make everything in the world interactive. Every stone, every tree, even the floor and the walls can be broken down. It's much like a Minecraft or a Terraria game.
Yeah.
So it grew up a new challenge, because every time we wanted to add something to the game, and we have to think, okay, what can we do with this thing while we are adding it? And also, for example, when you break down a bush, you collect grass, and grass can be used to make armor and stuff like that. When you break a stone, you get, of course, stone. And this is applied to almost everything. So every item has some kind of implication for the character development. So if you smash a stone, for example, you can use the stone to make a weapon made of stone, or an armor, or an helmet. And so every time we wanted to add something, it was really hard, because we had to take in consideration every possibility, and it was a nightmare.
I'm just imagining the giant spreadsheets that you
Yes,
guys made to be like, okay, cool.
colorful spreadsheet because I like colors in my spreadsheet.
Yeah. It's like, all right, cool. We got a rock. What's a player going to be able to do with a rock? You know, okay, now we have a rock wall. Well, now we have a boulder, which is like a rock, but bigger. And, oh, man, that's just crazy. Well, well done in putting all of that together.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Francesco, I'm entirely out of on topic questions. But before I let you go, there's still, even though we're not live, there's still one last bit that I am going to have you participate in that I like to call the 5 questions. Now, in case you're unaware, or for any first time viewers out there in the audience, the 5 questions are a series of, well, 5 questions that I put together before the show that have absolutely nothing to do with anything we've talked about so far in the show, with the exception of one of them, but that was an accident. So there are no right or wrong answers. You will only be secretly judged by me. Are you ready?
I was born already.
Wow. Bold words, sir. All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite holiday?
That's a hard question because here in Italy, Christmas is the biggest one. We don't have Halloween. We are not very into it, and most of all, we don't stay home for Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
But Christmas we do, and on Christmas we have gifts, and it's cold outside, so you have to stay home and play video games. So I think I'll go with Christmas.
You know, I feel like everybody does.
Yeah,
But, you know,
I
hey,
prefer the summer,
yeah.
but Christmas is good.
All right, cool. Well, then, question number 2. What is your favorite movie monster?
Wow, movie monster. Oh, this is a hard one.
Don't ask
I
easy
think
questions.
I think I'll go with the classic Alien from the Ridley Scott movies. Mostly because when I was younger, I was really into the lore, the story behind the alien, and who made it, and all the sci-fi world around it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I go with the alien.
You know, I could have gone without Prometheus and Alien Covenant in regards to their connection to Alien, but I feel like if Prometheus hadn't been related to Alien, it could have been an excellent movie.
Yeah, Prometheus was kind of a downer. Uh, yeah, it's a sad story. I don't want to talk about it.
You know what? And we won't. So, question number 3. This is the one we've already kind of touched on accidentally. Console or PC?
Yeah, console.
Yeah. It was like, do I even bother asking this question? But I mean, I didn't feel like improvising one on the spot. So, question number 4. This is the question that honestly trips everyone up, but I'm hoping it doesn't trip you up.
Sure.
Does it belong in a museum?
What doesn't belong in a museum? Something.
I'm going to say this one more time.
Okay.
Does it belong in a museum?
Oh, shoot. What does it belong to a museum?
This is a reference to
Like to Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's a yes or no question.
okay. I think yes, it belongs to a museum.
Good. Thank you for picking up on the Indiana Jones thing. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, all right, everybody's tripped up on this question so far. I feel like the guy from Italy, where part of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where this comes from, takes place in his home country, might get this question. And you kind of
Yeah,
did.
yes.
So well played, Francesco. Well
Thanks,
played.
sir.
All right. So we are now at question number 5. What is your dream travel destination?
Ooh. This is a hard one. Um, Dream. I think it's a battle between two locations. One of them is Morocco, mostly
Okay.
because my girlfriend is from Morocco, and I never been there. But also South America because my father lives there, and when I was very little, I lived there for a couple of years, but I never had the chance to fully explore the South America,
Yeah.
in particular Ecuador. And so I always wanted to go back there and spend some time, even better learn Spanish because I don't speak Spanish. I can understand it, but I can talk it,
Yeah.
speak it. And so it's a hard battle between South America and Morocco.
You know, I'm not going to make you choose because those are 2 excellent answers.
Thank you.
I would also like to go to Morocco someday because it looks wonderful in everything I've ever seen of it.
Yes.
So, well, Francesco, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I have been putting the Heartbit Entertainment or Interactive
Okay.
Twitter on the box right in front of you for the whole show. Is there anywhere else people should go aside from the Steam page for any updates on Doom and Destiny Worlds?
I know it's that young people don't use it anymore, but we use a lot Facebook because
Okay.
when we started using developing games, Facebook wasn't cool and hip. And so
I
a lot of
don't
the infos
I
and
don't
our
know that it was
communities over
ever
there.
cool and hip, but it was useful.
Yes, it was. And it still is. Or you can follow me on Twitter.
Okay.
And so that's it.
Well, for everybody watching, 1, thank you for making it this far. 2, all of the pertinent links will be linked in the description down below. And hey, while you're on your way down there, why don't you stop, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and maybe give that bell a ring too while you're at it. Well, Francesco, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to switch camera angles right now, and I'm going to say thank you all for joining us in this experiment for a first time, specifically for YouTube video. I, of course, in the same playlist, have all of the previous interviews on that Tom Clancy show. And if you want to check them out, hey, why not go give it a look? I'll try and put it up there if I can figure out how to do this. I'm old. I don't know how the YouTube works. So thank you all for joining us, and I'll see you next time on the next episode of That Tom Clancy Show.